All right, welcome. Today we are diving deep into the Book of Galatians. Now, it might be a short letter, but wow, its message is just as explosive and relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. We're talking about the gospel of radical, unshakable freedom. But to kick things off, let me ask you something. What happens when you try to improve a masterpiece? When you take something that's already perfect, already complete, and you decide, this just needs a little something extra? So picture this. It's 2012 in Spain, and there's this century-old fresco of Jesus. Well, an 82-year-old woman, an amateur painter with the absolute best of intentions, decided it needed a touch-up. She thought she was restoring it, making it better. Instead, well, she unintentionally destroyed it, turning it into this monstrosity that went completely viral. The lesson? You just can't improve on something that's already finished. And believe it or not, that is the exact problem the Apostle Paul is tackling in Galatia. The believers there had been given a masterpiece, the pure, simple gospel of grace. But then some misguided teachers came along and convinced them to try and improve it by adding their own human efforts.
See, the true gospel is all about being made right with God by faith alone. It's a free gift. But the Galatians were being sold this counterfeit version, faith in Christ plus you have to follow the old laws. Here's the thing though, you can't add to grace without completely destroying it. The two ideas are total opposites. They're like oil and water. They just don't mix. Just like with that fresco, adding your own efforts to God's finished work doesn't improve it. It corrupts it. Okay, so to understand Paul's solution, he takes the Galatians way back. Back before the law even existed, to look at the original blueprint for what faith looks like.
He points them to Abraham. Think about it. Hundreds of years before the law was ever given on Mount Sinai, how was Abraham made right with God? It wasn't by his works. It wasn't by circumcision. It was simply because he believed God's promise. That was it. That's the original pattern. So what even is faith, really? It's not some heroic, difficult thing we have to do. At its absolute core, faith is just taking God at his word. It's believing that what he has promised, he's actually able to do. It's an act of trust, not an act of effort. And here's the crucial point. Abraham becomes the father, the timeless pattern for everyone who believes. Doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile, this whole idea of salvation by faith alone, it's not some new thing. Paul is saying it was first preached to Abraham thousands of years ago. Now, to make this conflict between grace and law totally crystal clear, Paul does something brilliant. He doesn't just use logic and theology, he uses a powerful, real-life story from Abraham's own family. He takes the story of Abraham's two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, and turns it into this amazing spiritual allegory. So this isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's his way of making these huge, abstract concepts of law and grace incredibly real and personal. And here you can see the two paths laid out so clearly. On one side, you have Ishmael. His birth represents human effort, our own plan to help God out, which Paul says only leads to bondage. But on the other side, you have Isaac. His birth was a flat-out miracle, born purely from God's promise. And that is the path of grace, which leads to real freedom and an inheritance. The conclusion here? It is decisive. It's absolute. Paul quotes right from the Old Testament, saying the two systems have to be separated. They just can't coexist as ways to be right with God. One is based on the never-ending anxiety of trying to earn approval, while the other rests in the security of receiving a gift. The old system of human effort has to be cast out to make room for the new system of grace.
So this idea of radical freedom, of being separated from the old way, it naturally leads to a really big, and frankly, a very fair question.
If we're no longer under the bondage of the law to earn our salvation, does that just mean it's a free-for-all? Are we just free to do whatever we want? What's the point of all this freedom? Well, Paul's answer is this really stark contrast. He shows that a life driven by our own impulses, what he calls the flesh, it just produces chaos and misery. But a life that's led by God's Spirit, that produces something entirely different. So you see, we aren't freed from restraint just to indulge our worst instincts. We are freed to cultivate our best ones. And it's so important that it's called fruit for a reason. Think about it. A tree doesn't produce an apple by gritting its teeth and trying really hard. No, fruit is the natural, organic result of being connected to the vine, to the source of life. And in the very same way, things like love, joy, and peace, they aren't a new checklist of rules to follow. They are the supernatural result of a life that's connected to Christ. Okay, so what does this spiritual freedom, this fruit-bearing life, actually look like when the rubber meets the road in our day-to-day lives with each other? And this is where we see this beautiful paradox. Genuine Christian freedom isn't freedom from responsibility. It's freedom for it. It's the freedom to finally stop being obsessed with trying to save ourselves and instead to turn our focus outward and truly serve other people in love. And Paul gives this incredibly practical example. He says if you see a brother or sister get caught up in some kind of fault, those who are spiritual, well, your job isn't to judge them or condemn them. Your job is to gently restore them. And you do it with meekness, with humility, always remembering that, hey, you're vulnerable too. That's what love in action actually looks like. This entire way of living is governed by a whole new principle. It's not the old law of Moses. Paul calls it the law of Christ. And get this, it's not a new complicated set of rules. It's a new motivation that actually fulfills every good and righteous requirement of the old law. And that motivation is love. And here it is, the ultimate takeaway. How do we fulfill this new law of Christ? By bearing one another's burdens. The final proof that we are truly free isn't what we demand for ourselves, but what we willingly give to others. So the real question that Galatians leaves us with is not what am I allowed to do, but instead, whose burden can I carry today?